All right, so today we're getting into the uncommon to very uncommon to rare genera, at least in the East. And then we're debating whether to expand and just start covering some of the Western genera that we didn't cover at all. These would be mostly Southwestern. And people can put into the chat whether they'd like us to do that or just jump right into species level things. But what we're covering today is just really uncommon things, and several of them are parasitic members of the groups, and we probably, as Claire mentioned, have at least one more week of this. Okay, so I want to first start out with Caupolicana, a very cool bee that I think I collected out west, but never in the East. In the East, I'm pretty sure there's two species. One fairly recently described from Florida and probably arching along the southern coastal plain towards the west. People could write in their observations if they have any of the of that situation. Okay, so I have, let's see, I have Western Caupolicana and Caupolicana from down in Peru and things. I think I'm just going to show this Caupolicana from out west. It's an old one, and it's Caupolicana yarrowi, which I don't. So this is a very old collection that I'm exploiting right now, and what may be the case is some of these names may have changed in the interim. But it is a Caupolicana, and we're going to look at that. So in addition to be large, so these are large species, bumblebee size in a lot of cases, maybe all cases. They have greatly enlarged ocelli compared to other species. And while there may be ones that come out in the evenings, or maybe sometimes they come out in the evenings too, I think some of the Florida ones will also be out in late afternoon. These I always associate with, I think that would be called matronal, coming out early in the morning, right after dawn, and going to their very selected food sources, none of which I can recall at the top of off the top of my head. These are, again, based on my limited experience and talking with people, are almost always associated with deep sand and sandy areas and old sand dunes. At least that's where people are picking them up. And they would be in the Southwest, in the United States, Southwest, and in Florida. And to the north, they disappear pretty quickly. The handy bee manual, not the handy bee manual, the bee genera memorization charts. We're going to go to Caupolicana. Is pretty simple for this species. You can see both the males and females. They don't even mention the ocelli being large. But it is striking. But again, it's a relative thing, right? It's relatively larger. It's hard to, you want for a character something that's firm and discrete. This versus that. Versus bigger, smaller, some kind of relative thing. So basically it says 3 submarginal cells, and then what we're going to go and jump and look at is that first recurrent vein, instead of plopping into the middle or the interior of the second submarginal cell, or even out towards the third sometimes, it's really stuck right at the intersection of between the first and second submarginal cell, that cross vein. It joins there, and in some species I've seen it also goes right into the first submarginal cell. Now, I believe, so that works in the East. When you get to the West, I think Tiloglossa also has that kind of characteristic joining of the submarginal cell. And the first of the recurrent vein and the first divider between the first and second submarginal cells. So, but we don't have not Tilithrix, we don't have Tiloglossa in the east. So we will revisit that if we move west as per the interest in the group. So
2 votes for that, by the way.
2 votes? Okay. And maybe we'll, going around the world would be rough, but in the east, we have the guide for that. Okay, so I am going back to here, and we're going to take a look at this wing venation. Wing venation is so often our friend, and it's really clear. So in this case, it joins, well, you know, you don't really need to see a whole lot more than this. So there's the recurrent vein, the first recurrent vein, 1, 2, 3 submarginals. Here is the division between the first and the second, and it joins right at that intersection. And I have seen them to the interior of the first. That's what we have in terms of a ID string. So if people know of something different or exceptions, in other words, that do you know other genera that have this situation other than Tiloglossa, and particularly in the east, let us know. But theoretically, that's all you need to see. And you'll also just notice, as we back this off, a very large and lovely fuzzy bee. This is a male, I'm pretty sure. And then the female is extremely plumose. Let me put this one away and grab another one just so you can get a quick look. Again, you're just not going to run into these unless you're out early in the morning and you're out in the right kinds of habitats. All right. It looks like I have mostly males here. Thought I had pulled a female. Okay, here we go. This one is Caupolicana gayi, and take a look at this. You can just see all the. This is, I think, I'm pretty sure it's from South America somewhere, and you can see all the intense scopal hair situations going on here. It looks like on the femur and less on the tibia. Let's swing this around and see if there's a less scoopy shot, but a little bit better. But you can see just lots of scopal hairs and a very densely plumaged thing. Let's look at in this species specimen, we'll look for our vein thing again. And indeed, there it is. 1, 2, 3 submarginal cells, and then we have the recurrent vein joining right at that intersection. Keep this in mind here, that this marginal cell, this is kind of a normal marginal cell. We're going to move into another group that has this marginal cell really truncated down to here, and that's its golden ticket to identification, at least to the group. So now we're going to jump, males and females, pretty much the same ID string on those. So now we're going to go to the Melecta, Xeromelecta, and Ericrocis groups. So I am pretty sure, although I'm not up on this as I should be, I'm pretty sure that Melecta and Xeromelecta have now been, in the latest revision, combined. Someone could let us know about that. That would be awesome. They do look quite different, and so for at least today, we're keeping them as separate entities. So I'm going to show you, we'll get to the ID string here, but there's a very distinctive look to the faces of these things. It's difficult to describe, but I'm just going to show you one. You can look more up. It's got this, the face is elongated at the clypeus level, and the eyes are relatively small, relatively flat head. This is sort of a terrible shot, I think, in terms of a lot of glare. But, and this is the labrum right here, and this is the edge of the clypeus. But it has that look. I don't know.
What are we looking at?
We're looking at a Melecta.
Melecta what?
Pacifica. And,
Male, female?
this one is a female, and it shouldn't matter in terms of the ID string is going to be similar. So first, let's jump back to the wings, and we will look at the characteristics that I hinted at. Let me get a card here. Maybe put that under there to highlight that a little bit better. Okay, so here, first of all, just note that the first recurrent vein here is way up into the second submarginal. Submarginals are 3 again, 1, 2, 3, and there's our marginal cell. So instead of being way up here like would be normal, it's very short. In fact, it's almost even with the submarginal cell. So that's a very distinctive character of the group. So all, well, Melecta and Xeromelecta, again, perhaps a hint as to why they've gone back and forth as being separate or the same. So if we go to the guide here, and we go to, we see that Melecta and Xeromelecta are in the same, no surprise, subfamily. And both are really rare, and they're both Anthophora nest parasites. Again, hints at maybe why they are sometimes co-joined and sometimes not. The look is very different. So if we're looking at, I think did I get, I want to make sure I'm in Melecta, yeah. If we look at the ID string, and I have to move my thing here a bit because I can't see myself. So they're relatively large, larger than a honeybee. They have a bit of a characteristic of a bumblebee when they're flying. I remember though once, you know, I was out in the spring and I saw this bee fly by, not near an Anthophora nest at all, and I'm like, that's a Melecta, I need to get that. So it has something distinct enough that even when flying, you might have an awareness that you need to catch that one because it's cool and uncommon. So because it's a nest parasite, the female has no scopal hairs, and because it's related to Anthophora, the front wing cells have none of the microscopic hairs internally like the eucerines would have. We'll take a look at that. We saw the very short marginal cell, and I'm going to turn this down. And we're also going to look at T1. So the Melecta Xeromelecta difference largely comes down to hair patterns. And a good place to look at that, because it's relatively distinct, would be T1 compared to the hairs on the thorax. In Melecta, it's pretty much the same. The hair lengths are the same. And there are these, in both Melecta and Xeromelecta, are the scutellum has these 2 bumps. In Melecta, it really projects out into these cone-like, you know, almost spines on the scutellum. And in Xeromelecta, they're more like small bumps, but with a mound behind them. So, but in Melecta, you basically almost never actually see those cones because they're so embedded in hairs, and in Xeromelecta they're clearly visible. So let's see if we can find that stuff.
We have note that Xeromelecta is now under Brachymelecta.
Oh.
And journal link that
And what?
we will share.
Oh, there's, okay, good. I knew that Xeromelecta was involved in something, and but apparently it is not Melecta, but Brachymelecta, which we're not covering today. Okay, so so that's good. Now we're into error in communication with the camera. Okay, turn that off. And are we moving? Oh, we're not. So let me just flip off and flip on and try moving this again. How about automatic white balance? That. I'm moving my specimen, but it is not showing up here. So some communication thing. Maybe I bumped one of the wires on this thing in the back. I'm not sure. Still nothing changing here. I may have to redo this one live. Let me turn off the acquire. It's got a question mark there. That seems weird. Okay, we're going to, oh, it has freeze on for some reason. Okay, now, nope, still nothing. And there it goes away.
Something's happening.
Oh, it's thought I wanted to think about freezing something. Let's try live fast again. And I think I want to get rid of the freeze part. But it keeps coming back on. How about that one? No. Live fast plus. All right, I'm going to have to reboot this, not the whole computer. All right. Sorry about that. And we don't need that. And we don't need to look at CNN, but we do need to get to Nikon elements. And thank you again, Craig, for loaning all this. The wheel of Nikon is upon us. You can read about pig kidney transplants if we get bored. Did something come on? Oh, there we go. And oh, that's right there. Okay. Okay. It's thinking. Camera is on, and it is not loading for some reason. The hasp is in. Looking to see if there's anything else on here that I should. Oh, it did come up. I saw it come up. There we go. And now we'll try again. Acquire. Pardon?
We can see your screen now.
Okay, good. Oh, were you not able to see the screen at all before?
No, we were just like stuck on CNN or whatever.
Okay. All right. So let me widen it up. All right, we're back. We're back in the game. All right, so Melecta, relatively hairy. So this hair, the hairs on T1 doesn't matter the color, about as long as the ones on the back of the scutum. Now, the cones are in here on the scutellum, but you basically can't see them because without scraping a lot of hairs off, which I'm reluctant to do since this is a Smithsonian collection, you can pretend perhaps to see the location where those projections live. And you certainly can take a pin and poke in there and you'll feel them come up. So this is the projection, which are also just covered with hairs. And here is the other projection. Here, you could not tell that really, basically. You can take a pin, and always when you're trying to reveal something by removing hairs, just the tip of a pin will do the trick. You just rub it back and forth and the hairs generally will fall off. So we have that. We looked at the wing venation and the difference between the fact that there's long hairs here but not there. I think that covered the basic Melecta characters. And now we'll jump to, put this back together, back to Xeromelecta. That was a specimen from Nevada. Okay, so first of all, when you see a Xeromelecta, and these were in the old days, as the labels on here still say, these were considered Melecta at one point. A similar body shape in ways. We'll look at the face here again. And the males and females will be similar because the species are all nest parasites. So let's take a look at the head again.
You have a Xeromelecta.
This is Xeromelecta. Is it interrupta? No. Californica. Californica, yeah. And so it's going to look, in terms of the hairs, the oppressed hairs, very much like the oppressed hairs that you would see in Trioepilus and Epiolus. And here, but here's this face, relatively short eyes, long face, in this case converging, but I don't know that that's a view, kind of this weird fat antennae. So there's a look again of this group. And now if we look at the characters, we go back to our wing venation. And it's upside down, but it's good practice to look at things upside down. Take a piece of paper here to highlight the wing venation again. So here we go. This is the base. So this is 1, 2, and 3. Recurrent vein is hitting it well into the second recurrent vein. And we see that really short marginal cell again, basically in this case just slightly behind the last submarginal cell and distance on the wingtip. So that's really an important one. The look and feel is going to be pretty similar to Ericrocis, which we'll see next, and not at all like Melecta. But let's look at some of the abdomen characteristics here.
2 things real quick.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the wing and do that card thing and move your cursor so I can get a picture? And then also while you're doing that, will you answer the question? Do oppressed hairs stay oppressed if we wash and dry our specimens through pollen?
Yes. Yes, unless you're a horrible washer and dryer, and then long-haired species. But even then, let's say you had a very floofy Melisodes or any of the Eucerines have big long hair, and bad, that's a value judgment. You can wash specimens and then all their hair is just matted down, which is a terrible state because a lot of times you want to look at the colors of those hair, and inevitably matted hair looks black, even if it's white. So that's not a state you want to have. And if you do get matted hair after you're washing, then you should evaluate how you're washing. So sometimes it's a matter of you're not fluffing it enough, it's not bouncing around in a towel, a paper towel, or a with a blow dryer against a screen in a canning jar, or like we do, we put them into net bags and drop them into an actual dryer. And you may not have done it long enough, or you are working with specimens that perhaps were in propylene glycol, which is really tricky sometimes because you have to soak them in order to access the interior of the specimen. So the interior of the specimen may also be filled with propylene glycol. And remember, there's these openings, these spiracles in several places, particularly maybe only on the thorax, and that will just empty out later. So you might have done a nice surface wash, but then when you're drying it, that propylene glycol is going to start leaking out and start matting down your hairs, or at least making it look kind of sticky. So all those could lead to why you have matted hair, but you still would be able to look at that hair and say that's long hair matted down versus these short oppressed hair that we're looking at here, particularly when we shift to the abdomen. The vibe, though, is like Trioepilus and Epiolus and Ericrocis and Epioloides all have that look. And I'm trying to think. I don't know that any of the others really look like that, that group there. They're not closely related either. They just have decided that was a design feature they wanted. So interestingly, though, there must be something about it because are they all nest parasites? I think so. Maybe they're all in Apidae, so perhaps they're closely related. I'm not sure. I will stop speculating. So here, like Melecta, there's no internal hairs because it's in the related to Anthophora, so no internal hairs in here, or very few. I actually see none. We have the truncate marginal cell. And did you take your picture?
I did.
Okay. And we'll go back, and now we will look at the rear end, and you can see the triepulus epulus vibe here of these oppressed white hairs creating different kinds of islands as they move forward. But this is a very much a Xeromelecta look and feel. So, and you can see, although it's bright enough, it's kind of hard to detect that. But yeah, it's hard to show. These are oppressed short hairs, and they're very different from what you're going to see. And this is this difference from the longer hairs and upright hairs on the thorax. These aren't that long, but this is clearly different from that in terms of the type of hair and the length of hair. Additionally, when we were looking at this one, and I may change this, if we look now at the, I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to get hopefully a better specimen, because usually the hairs on the scutellum, this is rather dirty, are relatively sparse to almost absent, and this is the scutellum, and you can see these two mounds here with a something of a point near the top, and so that's again, I'm not sure that Ericrocis even has that, but that's very distinctive. That and Melecta have maybe the only things that really have those pointed bumps within the scutellum. Nomata, another nest parasite, will sometimes have features on the scutellum that are modifications, but they're almost always, rather than creating a mound, are creating either a low pillow or they're creating a flattened, like the whole area is extremely flattened. Okay, I'm going to show you a different specimen, and the pin's in the way there, so let me get a different specimen. Let's look at that one and see if we can use that one to see a better shot of the scutellum area. A lot of gloss. I'll try and cut down the glare here in a second, but you can see again these mounds, very relatively little hair there, a lot of topography and tiny little points at the tip, but they're not cone shaped, they're not sharp. Like if you didn't have the hair, Melecta has sharpened points, cones rather than mounds on that section. Okay, so now let's.
Someone's asking in the chat if anyone knows the purpose of the mounds. If you do, let us know. Okay,
I do not. So now let's move to Ericrocis, which is in a different subfamily, but is a nest parasite, not of Anthophora, but of Centrus. So if we take a look, is this the one I wanted, or maybe this one? So they all have similar types of vibes to, we'll take a look at the overall patterns. If we look at the overall patterns, super similar to Xeromelecta. Not quite the same, but really close. And if we go back to the Genera cheat sheet, here we are. I should also point out that Xeromelecta has now been found in a couple of places far to the east, whereas normally it was really a prairie species, or a prairie group, I should say, and you didn't see it near the Appalachians, for example, where there are now at least one record. And Ericrocis was even rarer. It's a nest parasite on the Florida native centris, which are rare to begin with, and so it is indeed rare. In fact, I'm not even sure that it's been seen lately at all. I'm not sure when the last record was, in other words. If someone knows of a recent record, that would be awesome.
There's a few records from Ohio of Xeromelecta.
Yeah, I think people are finding them more than they did in the past, because I believe in the, like Mitchell, let's say, did not have them even in Ohio. I could be wrong, but they seem to be showing up in more places now, which is cool because it means that someone's looking. Okay, back to Ericrocis.
So what is this that we have?
This is, what species is it? Oh, Lata, and I think that's widespread, and that's the one in Florida too. Don't know. There's no locality information on this. Okay, I don't know how many species.
Southwest and a couple in Florida.
Yeah, and those are very old. So, has the white patches. Does not have, has very, very low mounds, if anything. Let's take a look at that. And you will see from the wing venation is not the shortened marginal cell thing going on. So here's the scutellum through here, and there is a dividing line, but there's no point. I guess they're very low mounds, but I don't think you would mistake the two. And you have other good features. And I believe the others have auroliums, but I'm pretty sure that Ericrocis does not have an aurolium. I'm going to get another specimen that has its legs stuck out a bit more. Oh, they all seem to be curled up. You know, it'd be nice to confirm. Well, those, I only have two specimens, but let's see if we can find it here stuck down by the label, which will give us some contrast. Ooh, that is so dirty. Okay, so there are, I think there also may be some interesting characters in the tarsal claws. These look quite different. I only see one. There might be another on the other side that's hidden from us, but no pad between the tarsal claws there. When we look at the wing venation, take that down and take a look here, and you see that while not monstrously long, it's pretty much normal, like you would expect from a marginal cell, and the tip is well extended away from the last of the submarginals. It's also a very old specimen in the wild. It was very old. See how its wings are almost completely gone now. Looking for all those nests to parasitize. The other thing I wanted to show is, I think the other specimen might be a better bet on that, is the middle. So this is sort of the classic ID character. You're not looking at the hind tibia, you're looking at the middle tibia. In the other groups, for example, Xeromelecta, the hind tibia, tarsal claws are pointed, like most things are. And in Ericrocis, it has a modified tip that looks very dramatic in the guides, but in here I think we can see it, but it is actually a bit subtle when you look at it in person. Let's bring it in to there. And what you're looking for is this blunted end. Often it's blunt, and then there's a little notch at the other side of it. Let's see if I can bring it, rotate it around, not that way. Might be difficult to see the notch end, but it's relatively wide. Doesn't come to a point. You can kind of see a bit of the, and it's not completely truncate at the end. There is a tip, which in this view is difficult to see the tip. Maybe if can I bring it up like this? Is that the middle or that's the front? Nope, that's the front. So this might be a good view here. We are looking at something there. I think that's the fore one rather than the hind one, or the they usually have two. And so maybe that was the right one. Anyway, let me look on the other one now to see that. You can see that's not the most easily observed. Oh, that might be a good view right there. View of if you're trying to locate that feature. Okay, so here we are again with the Ericrocis, and are those the legs? Yeah, front legs, middle legs. So there is, and that one are both our targets. Let's see, let's go to the bottom one in terms of the view. So it's not, I think my argument here is it's not completely flat at the tip, but it has a shelf-like aspect to it. So this is it here. So there's a tip coming up, but there's this shelf, or I don't know what to call it, but they imply in a lot of the other keys that it's flattened at the tip, but that is a different shape. It's not just a simple point. It's a little more complex. Now, I believe the other one was also visible. Let's see if we can bring that into focus there for a slightly different view. Similar. So there is, I don't know if this is a great perspective. There's the pointy bit, and I think the flattened off side shelf is not really visible, and plus there's a lot of dirt in there. Anyway, that's the character, but if you also were looking at things like the lack of aurolium, which I think the others have, we might go back and check in a second, and the lack of huge mounds on the back, the longer submarginal cell, you should be in good shape to determine that it's Ericrocis, and also then you can look for that hind tibia later on and to validate that. And again, when you're looking at things, this is also demonstrating how clunky it is to use a piece of clay to do your identifications, because a lot of times you can't see well. So here, just one more time, long submarginal, there's the long marginal cell, and submarginals are quite recessed from the tip. Okay, so now what I want to do is, what time? Okay, I think we have enough time. what I want to do is work on Diadasia. So Diadasia, after I had put together the Genera cheat sheet, showed up in, I think, both Mississippi and Illinois. Thank you, Catherine, I believe, and also Mike Arduzer for identifying those. And so I'm going to pull a kludge of Diadasia. Yeah, good. And so we'll go through those, but we're going to go through them on the Discover Life. So if we go to Discover Life here, Apoidea, and I'm jumping to B Genera, and I've been playing around with it myself. So I've hit restart. So here we are again. So for those of you who don't know, questions on the right, answers on the left. I just restarted the guide up there. So if I hit any of these search buttons, just press that button, I should get all the genera, in this case, would be species in a species level guide that are on the are in the guide. Nothing is clicked because we haven't done anything. So if we choose, say, something like New Mexico, which has quite a few, maybe we will choose something with fewer and more familiar. So Missouri is a good example. Now it'll come down to 63 things, and Diadasia should be in there. There it is. So we believe that what this says, I should point out, is not that we know that any of these genera are in Missouri, but that we suspect that they could be in that state, and which is different, right? So this is not an authoritative list. So Discover Life has John Asher's specimen designations for each state in there, and that's pretty authoritative. And so this should not be used as these are the genera known from Missouri. These are the genera that could be in Missouri. So a very different thing. We're skipping over these because we don't really know what the family is or anything, or the subfamily. In this particular case, we're looking at the thorax primary color. You know, it's basically not green or blue. So we're pressing that last one. It's quite a few kinds. It didn't really do much, only 59 left. If we look on the abdomen and the thorax, we see that it's completely brown. So I shouldn't do this with the mind picture. I should show you what we're looking at. So let's pull one of these little fluffy things out. And they all kind of look like this. There's a number of species. They have a very rounded head, very similar to Tilithrix, and that will be a key character. Not a good view of a very rounded head, but if we turn it that way, you can see that instead of flattened like the Eucerines and to some extent the Anthophora ones, it has a semblance of rounded headness. I'm going to get a different specimen. I think the hairs are hiding its head roundedness. But in any case, it's not flattened across the top. So here we are again, a different Diadasia specimen. Very fluffy. So if we look on the sides, have what I would say appears to be very long legs, particularly the tarsal claws and things like that, very much like Tilithrix in a way, but much, much more hairy, and also does not have the bumblebee look that Tilithrix has, and it has some characters that differentiate the two. So now we said it basically has no maculations or colored markings on there. The axilla are not projecting outwards like Coelioxys or something like that. Has 3 submarginal cells, and basal vein is not strongly bent or arched like a lot of the Halictidae have. So it gets rid of most of those. I don't know what the jugal lobe are off the top of my head, so I'm going to skip that. I know that it has a toe pad So the rolium doesn't really do much for us. In this case, I don't know what's going on with the legs. And, you know, depending on the species, you can get, there's some quite small Diadasia. So I'm going to say, I'm going to skip the length thing because we cover quite a gamut. So that leaves quite a few to simplify. So we have no super fast path to Diadasia here. And you can see these are all the questions left that will help separate that group. And down here are the questions that we answered. We go back in here and we see a lot of things. So I'm going to skip the leg palm. I think we were looking at a male head antennal length. So let's take a look at that. I believe it's quite short. Let me just make sure this is a male first. And take this off. Well, you know what? Let's see if we can get there without doing a gender-specific question. Female tooth. Again, that's a female one. What if we skip that? We know that by looking at these things that it's got a very broad labral process, as do almost everything except megachile. So doesn't help tons with that. We got male and female characters coming out. Mouth parts, long versus short tongues. I don't feel like looking at their mouth parts. They're often recessed and hidden by the Gallia blade and all that. So we won't look at that. How about this wing venation? There's 21 versus 5. It seems like it might help with correcting some things. So let's look at the wings. So you can see with these guides, once you know a little bit, you can be like, I don't want to look at that. You don't have to really answer the questions one after the other. So here we have something that is ambiguously either pointed or rounded over, but the tip is well away from the edge of the marginal cell. In fact, if we look at the vein that defines the marginal cell, or even one of these veins, it's several vein widths away, which is sort of the measurement tool. So let's go back here. Pointed and laying right on the margin, or if bent away, less than 3 vein widths. So it's the alternative, rounded, squared off, or bent quite away. So it's still 21, and there's our friend Diadasia. We did get rid of a few. Female head, again, fovea. We're just going to ignore that for now. It has the usual one suture. You know, just know that versus having to look at it. But again, that's gender free. And here's some more female things. Wing surface, the forewing having minute hairs or not having minute hairs. Now, I don't know. I think they have minute hairs. Let's take a look here and see these. These are papillae, I think they would call them, and they probably have hairs coming out them if we focus way in. And you can see as I slowly move the magnification that there are indeed hairs coming out. So again, it would be great if they didn't, because that leaves us 3, but we have 17. So we lose a few. So males, scutellum, it says with 2, oh, we saw these spines, yeah, but it doesn't have those. It has this, which is more the normal circumstance. So maybe we got rid of 1 that way. We know that there are no hairs coming out of the eyeball because it is not a honeybee. And we will use my thumb to hit the enter button on that. We can come back to some of these. So let's, well, Xylocopa is on the list. So we know that the marginal cell in Xylocopa is extremely long. So 7 times as long as broad. It is not that. So that will get rid of 1 more genus, and we're just pecking at this. Now, here in the males, Amphorini versus Eucerini. So that's we're an Amphorine, right? But we're going to not know that. We're trying to avoid the male versus female ones now. So at this point, I think it's worth hitting simplify again because we've eliminated a good number. So when you hit simplify, you create a new guide, and there's still quite a few questions left here. You could look through these and pick which ones you want, and this will, jump down. So Melisodes versus selected others, nope. It does have the tegula that are not narrowed, like Melisodes does. Melatoma versus select other. This has a whole bunch of characters that we're just going to ignore because that seems like too much work to look at all that wing venation in the hind wing vein. And, using guides, you can be as lazy as you like. Cimolobus, so this is a cool one, and I think it will be next time we'll show you some Cimolobus specimens. An Ipomea specialist. Lovely. So this does not have this triple rim that Cimolobus has. So again, we're pecking at it. That was a female, but I think, they both have it, the male and the female. So we'll call that legitimate. Female, tibial spur, length for the male. We might have to get into what the particular sex here, because almost all of these remaining are things that are either Anthophorula versus Exmelopsis or has a gender associated with it. So I don't see anything else that's not gender associated. So I think we'll have to break down, and there's an interesting one there, and look, and it's the very last one. We could look at this because it does not a gender. So Diadasia is proboscis. Unlike melatoma, if you remember, the melatoma, the proboscis is sticking way the hell out there, and which is not the case on this one. So we did eliminate melatoma there. We might as well hit simplify again. Let's take a look and make sure we know the gender of the specimen. And we tuck it in here. We can see
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
We have an interesting thing going on in the chat.
Okay, what is it?
We have a paper shared.
Okay.
Comment. It's good that more kleptoparasites are being found because people are looking. Or if shellfish, Pindar, Packer are correct, as the apex of a bee community may indicate a good status of the community.
Mm-hmm.
We have a nice link to that. And then a question of, does anyone know any articles or resources for how one would specifically target kleptoparasitic bees for monitoring?
Yeah, kleptoparasitic, I would just comment on the kleptoparasitic bees. Usually, some of the thing is that wherever you have bees, you'll have kleptoparasites. They're rare because they have to be rarer than their host. And so sometimes you're, by looking at kleptoparasites, if you have quite a few, it basically means you've sampled well that community. It may or may not indicate that it's a healthy community. It just may mean that you've done enough sampling that you're getting the rare stuff. In terms of hunting down your nest parasites, basically the best way, so some love to go into bowl traps, and almost all of them will be occasionally found there. But if you are particularly interested in particular groups, then you obviously would haunt the places that have the host nesting. So like Anthophora, you would look at the colonies of Anthophora, which are, tend to co-locate, and look for your Melecta, Xeromelecta groups, and so forth on down the list. And a lot of times, because many species are ground nesters, you're going to be looking on the ground for a low flying kind of a specimen that's coursing back and forth of a bee in order to collect it. So it's like you have to become more of a hunter if you really want to pile on the specimens. Okay, what am I doing? I'm going to count antennal segments. And we may be running out of time on this. I've been dinking around too much on this, so we may just cut it short. But let's see if we go to the males, and I wasn't so darn lazy, we can count. Now, is that 1 or 2, or is that, you know, this is the problem. 2, okay. I think that's right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Refocus a little bit. 10, 11, 12, 13. And often so that's a male. And often males have a much shorter scape than the females. Again, I'm not sure why that would be, but it is the case sometimes. Okay, so we have a male. So we can quickly go back to the guide and use some of our male characters. Prophylactically, I'll just simplify the whole guide again, which I think did nothing. And so male head antenna, short, not unusually elongate, similar to the females, that would be yes in this particular case. So it got rid of a fair number. So remember, eucerines would have these really long antennae going all the way to the back. Female, male, head, face, presence, non-metallic, white or red. No, there are absent of colored markings. That did relatively little. So let's go to, well, we do have Xeromelecta and Anthoptera versus selected others. So we have both of those in there. Xeromelecta and Anthoptera, length of stigma 3 or more times as long as length of the pre-stigma, except in some Xeromelecta in which the wingtip end of the marginal cell is bent abruptly away from the wing. Others, length of stigma less than 3 times as long as length of the pre-stigma. All right, let's look and see if we can see that. I've always had problems, I have to say, with the pre-stigma issues. All right, so the stigma is the dark area that is anterior to the marginal cell. Marginal cell is in the frame here on the margin, bent away. There it is. There is a stigma, relatively small, and this is where I get a little fuzzy. So I believe this is the pre-stigma, but you know, it's not a great character. It's fairly short and not well defined because it seems seemingly part of the branching, but it is definitely the pre-stigma is not. So if we did that 3 times, that would be longer. And let's see if that helps. Length of stigma 3 or more times as long as the length of the pre-stigma. See, I would have said that it is because it's less. So what do you know? Even though I thought I was cooking the system, I was actually not. All right, so we got rid of those. Hit simplify again. And then we go back down and female characters. That is long tom versus short tom. We'll skip that. Tip shape, we could look at that. It's going to not be bilobe because that's the Caupolicana group, but we'll skip that. Jugal lobe we know is, well, we could say that we looked. So the jugal lobe is present, that gets rid of bombus. The bilobed is not the case, so that gets rid of Caupolicana. So now we're down to 3. We hit simplify again. You should feel free to hit simplify so you don't have to go through characters as much. So amphorini, males versus eucerini. So we could read through this, but the amphorini, which is the Diadasa group, males usually have much shorter antennae, which we've already documented. When held at rest, they usually extend no farther than the tegula, correct. In direct facial view, the vertex appears evenly convex, check. So we're only separating 2 out there. So we should be down to 2, Dionomia and Diadasia. Now, under some guides, Dionomia would have dropped out because theoretically they had that strongly arched, not marginal cell, strongly arched, yes. And, but if you look at it, it's like really not that strongly arched. So we've scored it both ways. So let's see if there's a way now. We have long tongue versus short tongue bees, so we could work on that. We have insider knowledge knowing that it's Halictidae, and then we have also insider knowledge knowing that it's a shortcut. If we click any of these, they will probably not. So it's a male. That one was a good 13 millimeters, but it's not going to separate them because Dionomia can be monster big too. So it comes down to having to think about, in this particular avenue that we took, to think about the mouth parts for the male Diadasia versus Dionomia. Now, if you look at them, we should have a separate character because it's easy to separate them because Dionomia males have also, which we have not seen yet, have really, really dramatic architecture on their hind and perhaps their middle, I think both, hind legs, both the femur and I think the tibia too. Just crazy weird. When I first saw them, it was like, whoa, what is that? But also long tongue versus short tongue, so we probably didn't bother because we had a character that separated them, even though we never use it. So the problem is when you start defining long tongue bees versus short tongue bees, you would think it'd be some kind of measure, but you start having to look at the palpi on the tongues. It means you have to have the tongue extracted first of all, and you know it's talking about somewhat flattened. And it's most of the time if you're just going out and collecting specimens, while it's great if you did pull the tongues, almost no one does that because it's very time consuming. So, so when you look back at all these are tongue architecture that is really difficult to tell when the tongue is folded back up and under. And, you know, is labial palpus with 4 segments, or is it with, you know, the first 2 that are somewhat flattened? Just really tricky. So I see in our future a Diadasia versus Dionomia character, and that for the males that needs to be written. And the nice thing about these guys is we can just go ahead and do that and put it up and fix the guide rather than have a publication series that is just immediately out of date because we forgot one little thing. So I think we're out of time.
We are out of time.
So any questions?
There's nothing lurking in the chat.
Okay.
Just if you have information on kleptoparasitic bee hunting, send it along. And I'm gonna, if anybody has that PDF already that they want to share with the group as a PDF, please do. I'm gonna see if I can track it down. That's all I got. Sure would love to find Schema lobus. Thank you so much. Yep, okay. I'm gonna stop the recording and we'll still be here for another couple minutes.